Today's video is brought to you by Blacktooth Publishing. It's been a while since we talked about Spider-Man here on the channel. One of the main reasons I haven't taken a dive into him in a while is because as far as on the movie front, things are very up in the air. As a Spider-Man fan, it kind of pains me to say I have little to no interest in the Sony Spider-Man universe. And I don't know how to say this without it sounding at least a little bit disrespectful, but it feels like this Sony universe is becoming the CW of comic book movies. And I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that Sony as a whole hasn't made any good high quality movies. I'm specifically talking about this very clear path and vision that they have to make a universe around the character of Spider-Man in live action. I don't count the Tom Holland Spider-Man films in this conversation because they collaboratively made those with the crutch of the MCU. Kevin Feige was pretty much the overseer of those three films. So nothing that they've been over in the world of Spider-Man as far as live action goes has me excited for anything coming with the character in the future. And it's not just because it's missing, I don't know, Spider-Man himself, but more so for the fact that it just feels kind of hollow and directionless. I had high hopes for it around the time of that first Venom movie. It kind of captured this early 2000s cheese that I haven't seen in movies in quite a while, and it kind of was a novelty, and that showed in its massive box office success. But they haven't been able to create anything on that level since the first Venom movie. Venom 2 was extremely lackluster and suffered from extremely heavy tonal shifts that just didn't mesh well together. It has some elements and bones of a good story, but it just didn't work, at least not for me. And I finally just recently caught MORBIUS, and although I don't think it was quite as repulsive as the critics did, it definitely wasn't a good movie. It felt like a studio mashup that had absolutely no soul. And the news around the upcoming Kraven the Hunter movie doesn't do much to boost my intrigue. It's been pushed back an additional 9 months. There's a couple of things that Sony's gonna have to do if they want these Spider-Manless Spider-Man movies to work. And this isn't some big opinion piece. This is simply the obvious answers at this point. And the first one we've already briefly touched on. They're going to have to stop turning all of these villains and anti-heroes into misunderstood heroes. But that seems to be the route that Sony wants to go with Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, and it just doesn't make much sense. I'm not the biggest Kraven the Hunter expert, but I know off rip there is no way to make Kraven a hero. I understand what they're going for. They want to make these E for everyone movies. I get it. It's a tough balance and tone to juggle. But eventually, if they're going to keep bringing in these villains, they're going to have to let them actually be villainous at some point. I'm not saying they have to pull a Joker and give us a R-rated movie. You can make a movie about a villain and still keep it at that PG-13 level. I think it could easily work if they adapted a tone similar to the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. They were fun and there was a lot of lighthearted and romantic moments, but the overall tone of things definitely dove a little bit darker. Now that means they're going to have to go out and get a director that they actually allow to direct and not chop up their movies to smithereens by the time it hits the theater. It's been quite a while since a Sony comic book film has hit the 2-hour mark. And I'm not insinuating that longer movies automatically mean better, but the main gripe with these Sony movies, at least for me, is they just feel chopped to smithereens. It leaves absolutely no room or time for character development. We just jump from plot point to plot point. A lot of the times it almost just feels like I'm watching a random compilation of scenes, especially with Venom 2 and MORBIUS. So Sony, please find a director that you trust. Let him or her direct their movie. I understand you're funding the film, you're gonna have input, you're gonna have say, but don't completely override the director's vision. If you're a producer, you're supposed to be a collaborator with your director, not an overlord. I'm talking to you, Avi Arad.
Avi was in charge the entire time. Avi knows all, right?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
We simply just can't keep having these villains who aren't villains, because one day if they do decide to bring Spider-Man back to this universe or bring a new Spider-Man into this universe, how are we going to make it work if every villain is actually a hero? At this point, it makes no sense for Morbius or Venom to want to be a part of the Sinister Six, which is clearly something that Sony is going for. Last but not least, and most importantly in my opinion, if Sony wants to make this Spider-Manless Spider-Man universe work, they have to sever all connections to the MCU. Every single tiny thread they've tried to make work simply makes absolutely no sense. Like the momentary time that Eddie Brock spent in the MCU just to leave back some Venom, so Venom could be in the Sonyverse and possibly in the MCU one day. But if he is, he's not gonna be played by Tom Hardy, obviously, because he's gone back to the Sony universe. And then randomly snatching Vulture from the MCU and bringing him to the Sony universe to talk to Morbius. Why would Morbius want to help Vulture? He spent the entire movie trying to help people and being a good guy. Why would the mention of Spider-Man make him want to help Vulture? That makes absolutely no sense. These loose tie-ins and trying to use the MCU as a crutch is killing their movies. The entire promo run for Morbius used its tie-in to the MCU as bait to get people to come watch the movie. Be honest, that's why most people went to go see Morbius in theaters. They wanted to see if Vulture was going to be in the movie, what role he might play, what that means for the connectivity of Spider-Man, what that means for the connectivity of the Sonyverse and the MCU. And then you watch the movie and every one of those scenes is deleted. It's just extremely disheartening. It's really messy. And it's really ruining their brand. They just simply can't use that MCU crutch forever. My hopes for the near future from Sony is that they need to decide whether or not they're going to keep Tom Holland in the MCU and let them have him and do their own thing in their universe, because this weird collaborative process isn't going to work as far as their universe goes. The only way this is going to work is that they get comfortable letting go of that crutch and trying some original properties separate from the MCU. The Madam Web movie is the only one that kind of has my interest a little bit, mainly because it sounds like they're actually trying to do something with the story that isn't just a generic origin, and I appreciate that. To be honest, the lack of creativity and original stories is the reason why I've been a little bit bored with comic books lately, which is why I was super excited to work with Black Tooth Publishing, a comic book publishing house focused on creating original stories that think outside of the box. The next one I'm gonna pick up is definitely Snakebite. It's an anti-hero story about a kid named Malik who lived in juvenile detention centers his whole life as a kid. One day he makes that decision to finally turn his life around, and to celebrate that change, he gets some tattoos. But these tattoos are not ordinary tattoos. They give him powers and they come to life. He starts to use these newfound powers to fight crime on the street level. I've spoken with the founder of Black Tooth Publishing, Omari. He was a finance guy who just loved comics, and he spent a lot of his time and money reading them, and one day he decided to just write his own. He has a Kickstarter campaign running right now, and it's going to go up until November 14th, 2022. The money from that Kickstarter campaign will act as your pre-order. I wouldn't have accepted this ad space if I didn't believe these stories had immense potential. If you guys want to preview these comics for yourself and be the judge, make sure you click the Kickstarter link down in the description. Thank you guys for watching.